you ever felt frustrated and helpless after listening and doing everything your vet told you to do, but it only made your sick pet worse and not get any better? That's me in 2008 with my first adopted cat, Meow. I did everything the vet told me to do, and I realized she wasn't getting any better and only worse. So I decided to look into alternative health options and was drawn to the stories of holistic pet service entrepreneurs and their transformative journey, overcoming obstacles, chasing their passion, and creating a movement that has caused a ripple effect of positive change in the lives of their clients and pets around the world. Join me as I share the raw, inspiring journeys of these amazing entrepreneurs, their successes and failures. My name is Amrys Wang, and this is The Raw Entrepreneur. Who is Erin Scott, please?
I am someone whose life has been forever changed by the love of dogs. That's the best I can say.
So, how did you... let me put it this way. How did you become a dog mom?
It's all my husband's fault. Back in 2004, we had just got engaged and we bought our first house. And my husband's name is Tim, and he had been wanting a dog ever since I met him. Ever since I met him, which had been in the year of 2000, he was like, one day, I'm going to own my own house and have my own yard and have a dog, because he had always lived in these kind of crappy apartments. and so as soon as we closed on our house, which was July 1st, like the very next day, I went on the website for our local humane society, and he had always wanted a female brindle pit bull. He had been like picturing this dog in his head for 10 years because he knew somebody one time that had this dog that looked like that, and he just loved it. And so for like 10 years, he's like, one day I'm going to have a female brindle pit bull. So I go on the website for our local humane society, and right there on the first page is a female brindle pit bull. And I'm like, well, this is our dog. And that was our dog, Lucy. And I was kind of hesitant about the whole thing. I did not really grow up with many pets. We had a bird actually when I was a little older. But I kind of thought dogs were annoying. I had this friend in high school, and every time you'd go over there, she'd be like, oh, don't get the dog excited because she'll piddle. And I didn't know what that meant. It means pee on your foot is actually what it means. And I'm like, this is horrible. Why do people have these things? And I had dated a guy in high school, and I'd come over, like looking all cute, and like their dog would come like barreling out of the woods covered in mud, like knock me down, get mud all over my cute outfit, and I just was like, these dogs are annoying. So I wasn't sure about the whole thing, but I very quickly fell in love, and Lucy just totally changed my life. And she's actually my podcast logo. If you see the artwork for it, that's Lucy.
Nice. So, so basically you didn't actually actively look to become a dog owner, did you? You did
Not
it
me
more because you
personally.
loved your husband.
Yeah. It's absolutely
Oh,
correct.
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And, besides, being a pet parent and all that, so you've been a pet owner for how many years now? 2004? Oh, it's
Almost
quite a while,
18
isn't it?
years. Yeah.
Wow, it's quite a while. So how many dogs have you had since then?
We've had a total of 4 personally, and then we had like sort of a foster dog situation at one point that was not planned. It just sort of happened, and we found that dog a lovely home.
Right.
And then we realized
So,
that we were not cut out for having more than 2 dogs in the house.
so, you know, your journey into, like what made you decide to start your podcast?
So it was kind of an interesting thing how it happened. in 2018, I had actually been diagnosed with breast cancer. And in 2019, in June, I became a breast cancer survivor the same week that I turned 40 years old. And so it was this very sort of like new decade, new energy. I just came out of this big sort of kind of traumatic thing. Like, what am I going to do with myself now? And I had some friends who were doing a podcast. It wasn't about dogs or anything, but they kind of made it look doable. And back in 2019, there weren't quite as many dog podcasts as there are now. And a lot of them seem to be focused on dog training and things like that. And I just kind of like hearing people's stories. And I know some people through volunteering and through other activities that I've met through the dog world. I have this huge community and network of people now in my life that I wouldn't have if it wasn't for the dogs. And people have these really amazing stories. And I was like, I want to hear their story. And my husband's kind of like, well, I think this sounds like you need to start a podcast to tell these stories. And I said, I think you might be right. And so my friends kind of showed me, gave me a little tutorial and made it seem doable. And that's kind of how it all started. I just love
Wow.
sharing people's stories.
Okay. So, you know, with your podcast and sharing stories, which one was say your most, you know, do you have a favorite story that you've told over the years, um or like with some people say they can't choose, so I'll give you like top three.
Yeah, oh my gosh, it would be so hard for me to choose because I have to kind of fall in love with each one when I'm doing it. I just put so much of myself into it, into each episode. So I have a friend of mine who I just love her stories, and her story was one of the reasons that I was inspired to start the podcast because she had worked this very kind of fancy corporate job for a long time. And then she left her corporate job to become a full time dog trainer. And she specializes in like trick dog training. And her dogs have actually been in Chewy.com commercials and a Mercedes Benz commercial. And they have been like live dog models on QVC Home Shopping Network. And I just love her story that now she gets to live out her passion because of these dogs that have come into her life and inspired her. And so that was one that was kind of in my head when I very first started the idea for the podcast. But then I get to like connect with all of, some of the time I have people who I know personally. Sometimes it's people that find me or get referred to me or who excited to have an excuse to talk to, for instance. Dr. Zazie Todd, who's a dog trainer and companion animal psychology. I got to do like an advanced review of her book, WAG, The Science of Making Your Dog Happy. And that was really exciting. It was the first time I had ever done something like that. So that one was very exciting for me. And I still kind of, get to talk with her on social media and, she knows who I am. And I just get all excited every time. So that one was very special to me. But honestly, like it's really hard for me to pick because just everybody who's been on, I'm so grateful, and I just there's this elements of, I see elements of myself in their stories, and I just feel so fortunate that I can share it. So it's really, really hard for me to pick. It's like picking a favorite child or something.
So okay, I won't push you too hard for that. But what about, okay, so how many dogs have you had over the years? Because you've been a dog mom for quite a while now.
So Lucy was our first girl, and then we had Kahlua. So I always call them our old gals, Lucy and Kahlua, and they both passed away in 2015. And then we have Penny now and Nino, our boy. So those have been our four dogs that have been our dogs. And Penny just opened up the door and came into the room. Um, she must have heard me talking about her. And then we also had a foster dog one time, but we realized that three was a crowd in our house.
Aw.
Sorry, she just opened the door. My husband's out there banging around.
It's okay. Don't worry about it. Uh, so, you know, okay, so what kind of dog mom would you describe yourself?
I hope not a helicopter dog mom. Um, we're not over the top about training. They're probably a little bit spoiled, but we do have certain manners that we have in the house. Um, and I'm also just very always concerned about their health and their food and their diet and the vet. And so we always seem to have strange health issues going on despite all of our best efforts. So I'm usually very consumed with researching what's going on and trying all these different things. And uh, but I just love to spend time with them, and whether it's walking or Penny's favorite thing in the world is to do a car ride with her head out the window. And so I plan like my whole weekends around being able to have time to take her somewhere for a ride. And Nino just, loves to walk and play ball. And so we just try to make time to do all their favorite things as much as possible.
Mhm. Um, when you started this podcast, um, it was, would you say, a side passion project for you? Um, so what do you normally do when you're not doing your podcast?
Well, I work full time and I'm in the car for about an hour and a half a day because it's like a 45-minute commute each way. So that takes up a lot of my days. But I love to read. That's really my favorite thing ever is to just read. I try to make time to do that at some point every day, even if it's just right before I go to bed or something. And and doing stuff with the dogs. We try to do dog walks as much as possible and do some sort of little adventures with them in our spare time, whether it's going to a state park or something like that. Um and then just trying to get together with friends and stuff like that. We're pretty low key people.
So, thank you for sharing, about your cancer. You know, I have several friends who are cancer survivors, and it's not an easy experience, and I think I have a lot of respect for people who have gone through it and survived, and they something usually changes for them, quite on a very profound way. Um, would you be willing to share how your experience has changed you?
What's so funny, right, is that when I got the diagnosis, I was so adamant and so convinced that this was not going to change me or to change anything. Um, I actually did something called cold capping during my chemo, which helps you keep your hair. So I didn't have to lose my hair during chemo because I've always had long hair and I was so like, this thing isn't going to take that away from me. Um, and I worked pretty much full time other than when I was actually like, having surgery or getting chemo that day or something. And I kept up all my volunteer activities and I was so adamant that like this was not going to stop me from living my life and being the person that I am. But despite all my best efforts, yes, everything changed. and and that was me basically, and just sort of realizing that I wanted to do more of what lights me up in life, and that there's a lot of times where I have let fear and anxiety and concern of what other people were going to think hold me back. And I have things in my heart that I want to share, and there's been times where I haven't done that, and I wasn't going to do that anymore. And so that's kind of where some of the podcast and other things came from. Was I I have something to say, and I'm not gonna let my concern for what somebody else might think, or the mean girl in third grade, that still lives in my head, I'm not gonna let that hold me back anymore, because this is, you only get one shot at this, and life is short, and all of those kinds of things really hit home for me. And we actually lost my mother-in-law to breast cancer, my husband's mom, and she was only 47 when she passed away, and my husband just turned 47, so it's been kind of strange. But
Mm.
it really just kind of hit home a little bit extra of, I have this second chance, or this new chance, or this moment of deciding, what am I really going to do with this life, and that she didn't get that, and I'm really gonna take advantage of it, and uh, yeah, that it, despite all my best efforts not to let it change me, it did.
Well, I think, you know, um, people, I think human nature, we're kind of lazy. We like our comfort zones. We don't like change sometimes, getting out of our comfort zone. But I think what it did for you was to create this, you know, some more clarity for you, uh, to give you a sense of purpose. Because I think, a lot of people go through life, myself included, not really knowing what we want, or like you said, we're too scared. We let our fears, our limiting beliefs to hold us back. And you know when I meet someone like you who has gone through you know cancer and survived it, and just having a very different outlook in life, I have a huge respect for people, you know, like you, because it keeps reminding me, because it's like, hey, don't be so lazy, you don't realize how lucky you are compared to other people, So when when I have good friends who went through the same experience as you, um, it made me, extremely grateful for really the little things in life, and for the fact that my friend's still around, and when they go through that life-changing experience, which is very profound, you know, um, you say you're afraid of losing and yourself, but I think probably you actually found yourself, maybe, a true, a truer self. The stronger you came out, you know,
That's a fair
because
statement.
yeah, because I think your podcast is one of the few podcasts that caught my eye. Uh, you know, like you said, a lot of podcasts talk about training and stuff, but you have very heart-centered kind of conversations. It's it's very refreshing. A lot of people don't like to share their true self publicly. We all like to wear a mask, and it takes a certain kind of person, to be brave enough to come forward. And this is where I always admire people like you, who actually step out of your comfort zone and set an example to inspire others. So I just wanted to thank you, for what you're doing,
You're gonna make me
because
cry.
because we need more good people like you, honest people like you, who don't shy away from, you know, talking the truth, even if it's not very comfortable sometimes, because we need more inspirational people like you. So I just want to thank you. I really want to
Thank
thank you.
you.
You're so sweet and you're so humble. You know, um, it's I don't think a lot of people realize it, but you're a very, very nice person. You know, you're just
I'm
very,
just
you're just really shy, but but I think you're very sweet. You're a very
Thank
sweet
you.
person.
Well, I've heard you say before that you feel very shy or introverted, and I also consider myself very introverted, but I do like talking to people. I just really enjoy it more on like a one-on-one kind of thing. I get very sort of overwhelmed if it's like in a crowd, or like I'm a bad mingler. But I really do just having meaningful conversations with people, and like I'm not great at like where's the weather, but I'm like, what has changed your soul? Like that's what I want to talk about. That's what I want to know about. And for me it was dogs, and so it's really meaningful to me to hear how dogs and the love of animals has impacted other people. And also sometimes I'm just glad, I'm just like, oh, all of this therapy has worked.
So what would you say, you know, being, well, it's mm, might not be a fair question because you're a cancer survivor, so that's a bit hard to trump. But in your journey so far, what was, you know, the most, pivotal moment for you when sort of, because you said you're a reluctant dog mom, you know, didn't really want dogs. But when did you sort of like hit you that, hey, you know, being a dog parent really meant something to you?
So I'll tell you something here, and I have talked about it before. I don't Sometimes I feel like I need to give like a trigger warning before I start talking about it, just because I know it's really upsetting for people to hear. But um, so I meet my husband Tim, and he has a son when I met him from a previous relationship, and we met in 2000. And his son was 2.5 at that time, and then in 2003, his son was almost 6, and his son, my stepson, and his mother were killed in a car accident. And that's like the most life changing, like if there's a like before and after moment in my life, like losing him was it. And so it was about 6 or 8 months later when our first dog Lucy came into my life, and we were still very raw and hurting. And that was why I wanted Tim to have a dog, is just if there was anything that could make him happy in that time, I wanted to do it, because we lost his mom and then we lost his son within like a couple months of each other. And then we had like this huge life transition, right, of like getting engaged, getting married, buying a house, and I had changed jobs and stuff, and all in this like really like all within a year's time. So I can tell you the moment that I literally just fell in love with Lucy was I was sitting on the sofa reading a book, and I didn't think that there was anything in the book that was going to be triggering to me emotionally. I think it was like a murder mystery or something, but somehow in this book there was something mentioned about like the loss of a child, and I just lost it and started crying, because this was all still just so raw in our lives, this tragedy. And Lucy had been like chewing her bone or something across the room, and all of a sudden she gets up and she like comes across the room and she climbs up on the sofa and she just kind of lays her head down on my chest and just kind of looks at me and just laid there with me. And that just made me cry even more. And she just laid there with me while I cried. And like, I don't know, in that moment it was like I got it. Like I'm like, oh, now I understand why people have dogs. Now I understand, and Lucy was always so like emotionally attuned to us. um and that wasn't something that I had ever really experienced before from animals, because I hadn't really been exposed to many of them in my life for any real length of periods of time. So that was the moment that I got it. And that was probably like about 3 weeks after we brought her home, so it's also not like she had been in our lives for that long of a period of time. So that's the moment.
Mm. You mentioned you do volunteer work. So what kind of volunteer work do you do?
So I'm part of an organization here in Baltimore, and in Baltimore, everything is called Be More as an abbreviation for Baltimore. So our organization is called Be More Dog, which sometimes I think has a funny kind of play on words to it because we kind of all should be more dog, but that was not our intention in naming it. But we started as kind of this group of pit bull owners who just kind of wanted to do something to help kind of give pit bulls a better name, I guess. Um, but I guess what we really kind of quickly started seeing is the need of what people really needed in Baltimore. They didn't need pit bulls to have a better name. They needed help. There's a lot of poverty in Baltimore, and people needed help taking care of their animals. So we ended up creating what we call the Be More Dog Wellness Clinics, and we're all volunteers, and we go out and do these like pop-up veterinary clinics in different parks throughout Baltimore. So we kind of worked with, there's some different like maps that are kind of show you like areas of need, and we would talk to like animal control and see where there were areas of problems. So we kind of tried to identify different neighborhoods that have like the most need for services, and that's where we go. And we do this whole pop-up event also all in one day. We have veterinarian, we can do we give out free leashes and collars. We have partner programs that provide free dog food. If people are interested in spay neuter, we can do that. Not on site, but we can sign them up and get them connected to a free grant program. And we try to make it like a one-stop thing for anything that you might need for your dog. And occasionally we see people who have dogs with a health issue that's more of a not something that she can take care of right in the middle of a park. And so we do have some other partner organizations that we can refer them to that can even provide transportation and things like that. So yeah, we've been doing this for 10 years, and we started out really small and have just been able to grow and partner with other organizations and try to, every time we see a need for something, we try to address it and find somebody. If we can't help, we try to find somebody that can help uh, and take care of, of animals, and help people keep their animals in their home and not have to surrender to a shelter or something like that when it's something like I can't afford this or that. We're often able to help people keep their pets in their home, also. So we've helped over 3,300 dogs over the last 10 years, and it's like, if there's one thing in life I am most proud of, it's that.
Wow. From someone who really didn't like or cared about dogs, you just threw yourself into the dog world, dog mom, dog volunteer, um,
Yeah,
and
I mean, when I do something, I really do it. with it
you
with anything.
wow, that's beautiful, honestly. And I love the fact that you're working with you know uh the low income families who might have a hard time economically to keep their dogs. Not a lot of people actually realize, when they go through hardship, it's not just the humans that suffer, the animals, the pets actually suffer. um, and also, I think the situation, because I live in Singapore, which is different from the US, but from what I understand, in the US, not everyone owns their own home. Most people usually tend to rent their homes. So to be a pet owner and rent a home is not easy either, because you need to actually have
Right.
permission, and you need to, depending on the landlord, you might need to pay, a higher premium insurance, or some kind of deposit, just in case your dog damages the
Right.
property or something. So I think what you're doing with BMO is dogs is it's pretty cool. You're a really cool dog mom. Really, really cool dog mom.
Thank
You
you.
know. You mentioned, you've had quite a few dogs over the years and they've had health issues. So, you know, um, could you share, what do you mean, like what kind of health issues did your dogs have?
So it started with our girl Lucy several years ago now, and it was kind of like this mystery illness, and it took us a really long time to get her properly diagnosed. And I got this real crash course in kind of like everything I disagree with about the veterinary industry in trying to get her properly diagnosed. And what she ended up having was sort of this rare illness called insulinoma, which is a cancer of the cells of the pancreas that create insulin. So it was causing her to, it's sort of like the opposite of diabetes, right? It creates so much insulin that it made her blood sugar drop to the point where she was having seizures. So all we know is she starts acting sort of oddly. She collapsed on our walk one day. Again, this is because of low blood sugar, but we didn't know that at the time. And then, she would have these sort of tremor episodes, which are called focal seizures, or like kind of like a partial seizure. And I'm trying to explain all of this to our veterinarian, and I just felt like I wasn't being heard, and that they were jumping to other conclusions and wanting us to have all these different tests done that to me didn't make any sense for what I was describing. And it was this vet, kind of like right down the street from our house where we had just been going ever since we had her, just because it was right there. And she had had some blood work done, and all this started in like April. So she had all this blood work done, and they call us and they're like, well, everything looks fine. You need to go have this and that, like an echocardiogram and all these things done. And I'm like, this isn't what's going on. I don't know why I thought that. I just knew that like they weren't listening and I wasn't being heard and they weren't taking me seriously. And it starts getting worse and worse and worse. And it gets to the point where now, she's having the full blown, like what you'd call like a grand mal seizure. And I'm like trying to tell the vet this, and it's like almost like he's not believing me. And so I had to start like taking videos. And now I'm like, I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen an animal have a seizure. It's like the most horrible thing I've ever seen. And now I'm trying to like take video of it, which like felt awful and icky to me, but it's like this was the only way I could get him to believe me that this is what was happening. So now they're sending us to like a neurologist, and they're kind of doing these tests, and it's kind of like, well, I don't know, she looks fine to me. And I'm like, what is going on? So I knew someone who I call her like a holistic dog mom. And I reached out to her and I was like, do you know a veterinarian? Like who would you go to if your dog was having a problem? So she tells me somebody, and it's like they're like an hour and a half away. And I don't even care. I'm like, it's fine. We'll go there. So they get a copy of Lucy's whole vet records. And we go for our first appointment, and she says to me, I think I know what's going on. And this is now July. She's like, well, back in April, she had had this blood work done, and she had a really low blood sugar reading. And she said, and I think there's a condition that could be causing this, that's causing her blood sugar to drop. And, we're going to do some extra tests. And sure enough, she was right. And that's how we got the right diagnosis. And so then I'm like, well, why didn't anybody pick up on this back in April? Like, we've been watching this poor dog have seizures for months, and nobody ever told us this. So now I'm going back to the vet and I'm like showing them like, why didn't anybody follow up on this? Like, her blood sugar reading was like 49. And they're kind of like, oh, well, sometimes it just, if the blood sits out too long, it can just drop, or like, I don't know, like it made no sense to me, whatever they said to me. And so I'm like, is anybody like, what is going on? Is anybody looking at these things? Like, what, this is not how, like what I thought was happening when I went to the vet, right? Like I thought like people listened to you and people were thorough and looked at things and wanted to get to the bottom of things. And I'm like, this is just not what's going on here. And so, I said, well, I'm transferring everything down to this other vet that's like an hour and a half away. And they got really like angry at me, and he called me a witch doctor. And I'm like, what is, just because I want my dog to be like cared for and like all options to be considered, like you're now calling me these names? And it was very crazy. So then in the middle, like, so while we're dealing with trying to get Lucy properly diagnosed, like some weird things are starting to happen with Kahlua. And I'm kind of going back and forth between these two vet offices again. And she ended up having mast cell cancer, but it didn't present in like the normal way that mast, like, it wasn't like she had this strange lump and that it came back as mast cell. It was this whole sort of systemic, like very advanced form, but that made it harder to diagnose. And it looked like she was having allergies or like reactions to things. And anyway, it was like months of trying to get her diagnosed. And then by the time we got her diagnosed, like it was pretty much too late for us to do anything for her. And we only had like a couple more weeks with her. And so all of it was like this crash course to me. I'm like, what goes on with these veterinary offices, and what do I want for my dog, and how do I want them to be cared for, and how thorough are things being? It was a huge lesson for me.
Hmm. Were you, since they called you a witch, a witch doctor, kind of a witch mom, were you, would you say prior to that you were more conventional kind of pet parent? Like you know, how would you say was your care? We like to talk about diet, lifestyle, kind of thing. Did that change much when you went to the witchy doctor?
So when we first got the dogs, like we didn't know anything, right? Like we just, I don't know, you feed them something from a bag that we got at the grocery store. I'm like horrified now, right? But it was like we just didn't know, and we just thought we were doing what they said to do, and I didn't know enough to kind of think beyond that. And then a couple interesting things were sort of happening. I was having some strange health issues of my own that got me really concerned about like my diet and what are we eating. And there was like a huge pet food recall here, I think in like 2007. And that was like what really made me first start paying attention to because like dogs were dying. And that was like what really made me start paying attention to like what I didn't even know that there was like a difference in dog foods and things. So we were still doing like a kibble, but it was like a higher end kibble because none of those were on like this recall issue. And then when I started volunteering and meeting people in the dog world, that was like the first time I ever heard about like raw feeding. And some of the people who were volunteering like were actually distributors for this raw dog food company that's actually based here in Baltimore. And so and then it was like I couldn't even afford that at the time, but that was like the goal in my head. It was like, okay, like when we can afford this, I want to switch to that, just because like that was when I just very first started learning things. So I think we had already actually switched over to raw by the time that they started having their health issues. And I mean, we had them for you know for about 10-11 years. So, I mean, they both been like a couple years old when we adopted them, so they were 12-13-year-old pit bulls at this time, which is a relatively average life expectancy. But yeah, I had started to become aware of raw feeding, and so they were probably raw fed for like the last like 2 years. And then I had started to become aware of like, oh, I'm not going to put this frontline or these chemicals on them. And like I had kind of just all been waking up to all that right before their health issues started. And now I'm like super crazy for like holistic person.
So, um, and in your journey as becoming a holistic dog mom, you know, um, would you was there a particular incident in particular that stands out to you that made you um you know um in terms of say methodologies or treatments, from a holistic point of view, that it's like so radical that some people might not have thought about, um in terms of like healing your dogs when your dogs was really sick.
So my girl Penny here, who's laying right next to me now, um, in 2019, she had a like a chronic UTI situation, and we were working with a vet, this holistic vet, and we were on, and she had her on some antibiotics, and it's like we had her on one antibiotic, and then as soon as she stopped taking it, the UTI came back. So then they like put her on like another course, and like same thing happens. Doesn't like it comes back right away as soon as she stopped the medication. So then they like sent it out, and I guess had some extra blood work or extra lab work done on her urine sample, and found like, oh, she needs a totally different antibiotic. So now she's on like the third course of antibiotics. And then that did it, and that seemed to clear up the UTI situation. And then a couple months later, she started having all these other issues. And like, for one thing, her weight went up out of nowhere. Like her weight went up by like 5 pounds. I mean, she's like like a 50-pound dog, so 5 pounds is pretty noticeable on her. But it's like we hadn't changed anything that, that she was like really being fed or anything. So that was like strange to us. And then she started having all these sores all over her. She's had these sores like all over her paws, and it got so bad like she could barely, like if we tried to walk down the street or something, like she would just stop walking. Like there was times when my husband would take Nino and have to walk him, come back, get the car, and come pick us up because she could, her feet were so sore, like she couldn't walk home. We had to like drive her home, and from like half a mile away. And then we go to the vet, and what do? They put her back on another course of antibiotics. And so all of this was happening right when COVID started. So now we're into like 2020. And I was like, we got to try something else here. And things were starting to shut down. And like the whole thing with like the curbside vet appointments where you can't go in with them anymore. So another friend of mine, who's also somebody that I go to for recommendations, I'm like, well, who do you go to? I got to try something else here, because we've been doing this thing with the antibiotics, and I don't trust this anymore. So she sends me like another vet recommendation, and it's a woman who actually works out of her home, so you can go in. I mean, we were masked and everything, but like at least it wasn't, I'm just like dropping them off and not knowing what happened kind of thing. So I start working with her, and she runs like the animal biome fecal test, and it comes back and her gut biome is horrible. I mean, just like the worst like results you could ever have. And here we are, we're doing raw feeding, we're doing fermented goat milk and fermented fish stock, and we think we're doing all of the things, right, that you should do. So, because I'm such a nerd about all of this stuff, I had actually done an animal biome test on her at the beginning of 2019, just because that was the first time I had ever heard of it, and it looked like fun to me, because that's like what I think is fun. And I just wanted to see. So I had kind of like a before she had all of the antibiotics result, and then an after. And the difference was shocking to us at how bad, like she had gone from like relatively normal and healthy to like so shockingly bad. And we knew she had had all of these antibiotics in the interim. So this new vet that we started working with, she had seen Dr. Margot Roman speak at like the various holistic vet conferences, and she's like, we're going to do the fecal microbiome transplant. And she actually uses her own dog as a donor, because she tests her dog all the time. And so we did one course, and one administration, and she had like a huge improvement. And then we did another one, and it's like she's been really good ever since then. And I think we did a third one about like 6 months ago, just kind of as like a maintenance thing. And so yeah, that I am like such a huge believer in the microbiome transplant therapy. Like I tell everybody about it. I know it sounds really weird. Anytime the word fecals in something, we're all like, what's going on? But this was so hugely, made such a huge improvement in Penny. Like it's amazing.
Oh, I love animal biome. I love what they do. I love poop. I'm obsessed with poop. Everybody, you know. Whenever my dog takes a crap, I will pick it up and feel it, look at it.
Right.
uh, and I agree. FMT, fecal microbiota transplant, whatever they call it. Animal biome. I lovingly call their FMT pills poop pills,
Mm-hmm.
the ones that they sell, because it has done wonders for my rescue cases. Because I'm actually a volunteer as well, so I do. I take care of community cats in my neighborhood. Once in a while, when I have the space, we will help dogs as well. Foster. But the poop pills are just amazing because they help to restore very damaged guts, especially if they've been on, lots of antibiotics. And a lot of people don't realize how damaging it is whenever your dog has to go through a round of antibiotics. I mean, sometimes, there is a valid reason why your dog has to go through antibiotics, um, but it also damages their gut. So we always have to, I explain to some adopters or pet owners, it's like, yeah, so after your dog goes through that, you actually have to support and heal the gut because unfortunately antibiotic it damages their gut health like in a very severe way, and poor gut health. My first dog that I adopted, Merlin, she was a puppy at a shelter, but I didn't know better at that time. But I think because she had very poor gut health, so she had skin issues, she had behavioral issues and stuff. So it took a while, to sort of figure it out as well.
Yeah.
Um, but I think what you did and what you working as, not all pet parents are like you.
I
Not
have
all
found that
pet
out too.
Yeah, not all pet parents are nerdy enough, and I love nerds, who will try and figure out, like what's wrong, and when they're not happy, with what they're getting from, say, their first vet, they try get a second opinion or third opinion. You know, uh, Not many pet parents actually will bother. They might go to the same vet, they might whine about the results, but they still keep going back to the same vet to
Right.
get the same results. And there's this thing about what was it? Is it Einstein who said, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result is
Yes.
insanity.
Definition of insanity. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I
So
have learned this in with my own health too, is just like we have to give ourselves permission to kind of go outside the box. And I think sometimes like we get, I don't know if like intimidated is the word, but it's like we look at, a doctor or veterinarian and think like, well, they went to school, they have these degrees, they clearly know more than me. But we can't expect any one person to like know everything that there is to know about everything, and we expect a lot of veterinarians. I mean, they work on multiple species of animals, and so yeah, I just have had to get comfortable with like, okay, this isn't working, I'm going to look somewhere else and I'm going to do research about who might know better, and I don't think I don't know all of the answers, but I know enough to know that like this isn't working and I got to try something else. But yeah, I think sometimes it's almost like this mental thing of like, well, we have to like give ourselves permission to like keep looking outside of the box and find somebody else that can help us. Yeah, I have a lot
Mhm.
of thoughts about that.
So, being, the kind of nerdy dog mom that you are, do you have like a system of, tracking your dogs? Because you said, your dog had a lot of health issues and stuff. So, did you, how did you manage to track and follow and pick up, certain abnormalities in their behaviors or anything to help you?
So I'll tell you the secret, which is that I'm not always the most organized person. And I seem to start thinking that I can like keep track of everything in my head. And what I have learned as I have gotten older is that that is not a reasonable expectation. And I have to write things down and I have to get more organized about things. And even when I was going through like the breast cancer stuff, I was kind of doing some different alternative health things, and I had this like these big like desk calendars, and I would write what I was doing every day. Like I would have to do certain things every other day and certain things twice a week, and so I had this whole calendar that I created for myself of of like what I was doing for my own health. So when Penny started having this health crisis right kind of like at the beginning of 2020, with when her feet started getting so bad, I started looking around for, is there some kind of like dog health journal or something, some sort of system? And I couldn't find exactly what I was looking for online anywhere, which kind of surprised me. And so I became determined that I was going to create this for myself. And so I started with just kind of doing a simple spreadsheet, kind of going through her history of everything that I did have, and just kind of doing an entry for like, on this date, we went to this vet for this reason, and this was the outcome. And this were the medications that she was given. So that's when I started looking and realizing, like, oh my God, she had had 4 courses of antibiotics in less than a year. And that's got to affect things. So it was just, I would have I have this folder of these papers, and I just kind of shove the papers in there, but it wasn't, I really needed to like get it down on paper to really start like putting it all together. And so then when we started working with this new vet, she does acupuncture, she does herbs, she does ozone. She was recommending that like we try doing like green tea foot soaks or Epsom salt foot soaks. And she would say, well, do Epsom salt for a week and see if it makes a difference, and then do green tea for a week and see if it makes a difference. And so I started trying to figure out, well, how am I going to quantify if what a difference is, if there's an improvement. So I started kind of just taking like notebook paper and like writing down, like, on this date she had like 4 sores on her back left foot, and I would take pictures of them every day at like the same time every day, so at the end of the week I could like scroll through and see, like, do they look better or worse, or and I was trying to like figure out a way to kind of keep track of all these things. And I started creating my own little version of a dog health journal. And I started just tracking everything with Penny that we were doing. And in the middle of all of this, in the middle of quarantine and everything, she gets an ear infection. So we have to start giving her, drops in her ears each day. And I think we had started the drops on like a Saturday. And on Monday, of course, I'm working from home because it's quarantine. And the mailman came on Monday, and our mailbox is like right outside of our front door. And we have a dog bed that's kind of right near the front door. So every day the mailman comes, the mailbox clanks, and she's like, oh. And she totally slept through it. She like totally slept through the mailman coming. And I'm like, that's never happened. Like, something, this is weird. So I wrote it down, like, it slept through the mailman coming. Like, this is weird. And so the next day, I think I had to run out somewhere, and I came back. And again, she's like asleep right there by the front door, and she doesn't get up. And I mean, I dropped to the floor, like, what happened to my dog? Like, she always gets up and greets me the minute I come in the door. I'm making noise, like keys and everything. And she totally slept right through it. And I'm like, this is really strange that like 2 days in a row now, she has slept through things. And so I start looking like, well, what have we been doing? And then I'm like, oh my God, we just started this ear medicine. And I'm like thinking like ears, hearing, like sleeping through things. Is she not hearing things? And I'm like, can ear medicine cause hearing loss? Like that, like you would think like, they would tell you that that's a possibility or something. So I start like Googling it, and I'm finding like horror stories in Googling that like, yes, sometimes ear medicines can make your dog lose hearing. So I'm texting our vet right away, and she calls me back like 2 minutes later, and she's like, oh my God, what happened? I'm like, because I'm just like, could this affect her hearing by any chance? And I'm like telling her, the story, and she's like, oh my God, stop using it right now. And she's like, I've been a vet for 25 years. There's been like 4 times in 25 years where dogs have lost their hearing from this medicine. She's like, it's such a minuscule percentage that like it doesn't even occur to her to say that this could happen, but it can absolutely happen. And so I didn't know whether she'd get her hearing back or not, but she did. It took a while, but she did. And I think it's, because we caught it so quickly. And so I really do feel like starting this dog health journal kind of saved her hearing. And so I started working with like a graphic designer to make it look prettier than what I had come up with, and then it took me like a really long time to figure out how to sell, like physically, like be able to sell this online. But yeah, so now I do have the dog health journal available for sale if anybody is interested.
Oh man, that's fantastic. That's an awesome story. I think definitely I think every pet parent you should you know have a dog health journal. you know um Even cat parents out there, or even if
Yeah.
you're a rabbit owner, if you're a pet parent, because animals, as much as we wish they could talk to us like in English, or Spanish, or whatever's your mother tongue, um, they can't. So you actually have to watch their behavior,
Yes.
and be a detective at the same time. So it's great that you love your dog so much that you actually notice, um, the little things that happen, and you actually write it down. And you're so right, because when we all like to think that we can keep everything up in our head,
Yeah.
but sometimes life can be, well, overwhelming. Life can be very busy, and sometimes we actually do miss out on the little details if we don't have it written down on, and we see it, there's a pattern forming, because sometimes we
Right.
don't see the pattern until we actually look at it on paper. So I think it's fantastic that what you created, the dog health journal. And I think every dog parent should get one, you know or at least learn from Erin, because she's the kind of dog mom that I think every dog parent should be. You should really, like, try and figure out, if you're not happy with a diagnosis, um, get a second opinion or third opinion. Do your own research, because you're right. We always think that vets should know best, because they spend so many years studying, and they should know everything. And I used to think that way too, because I trusted my vet. But unfortunately, conventionally trained vets don't see the whole picture. They don't think about the body in a very natural, organic way sometimes. The holistic way,
Right.
which is a bit of a shame, because I actually believe in integrative care,
Hmm.
where we should get the best of both worlds.
Yes.
You know, that's how that's how you tackle a problem. I don't think that there's any problem in life. There's not just one way of doing things to resolve an issue. you know um th- th- Nothing is always, I don't know, black and white. There's a lot of shades of gray,
Right.
you know and many different ways of looking at things. I love the fact that you know despite your cancer diagnosis, you were doing your best being a dog mom at the same time. I think not many people will think beyond their own problems, put it this way. Usually when something happens to them in a very life-changing way, they suddenly hunker down. Then they sort of shut down. They don't care about anyone else or anything else. They just want to me. But you're different,
I
from
think I went through a little
what.
bit of a phase of that, like the first couple
Yeah.
weeks were such a shock. But
Mm.
like I said, I had to kind of pull myself out of that and not, I was like determined that it wasn't gonna do that to me, I guess.
Yeah, and I just want to like acknowledge and say that when shit really happens in a person's life, it's okay to hunker down. But what I find extraordinary is, and very inspirational, is people like you who pick yourself up, you know, um, and push forward and move on one step at a time. you know uh it's not easy,
No.
but that's the thing which I respect the most about you know cancer survivors, or people who are going through something like that, is that they just push, because it's like, yeah, it sucks, but we're just gonna try one day at a time, push forward. I'm gonna have good days and bad days, but I'm just gonna keep trying. And you, from the way you describe it, you didn't, you didn't give up. give up. You just kept looking for, like, I don't want to lose my hair. you know so
Right.
I want to find, what can I do, what other therapies are there, what are my options, and I just want to acknowledge that, you know because really, to go through what you went through, plus being a dog mom, and as you said, your dogs had issues as well, and you were handling quite lots of things over the last few years that way. I think it's super.
Thank you. I never feel super. I just always feel like, I don't know, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, I guess. Um, I guess, I can be very determined when I do set my mind to something that something's not going to get the best of me or whatever. But I feel like the dogs got me through so much of the cancer too, and that they really helped me stay present and stay in the moment. Like if there's a lesson I have learned from my dogs, it's that I used to struggle a lot with anxiety, and honestly, there's a couple different things I've done about that, but the dogs are just a huge part of it, of just kind of really staying like focused and in the moment, and enjoying the little things, and just having gratitude for what I do have, and that despite whatever else is going on, around me, or that I have them to come home to. Sometimes I feel like they get me through so much that like this is like the least I can do for them.
So, I'm just, did you ever think, did you ever feel like giving up?
In life or in the cancer?
Mm, yeah, in life, cancer, when it got really hard.
um Not like seriously, but there's definitely been some hard times over the years, and more so in the loss of my stepson, or just in some of the struggles we went on, after we were first married. It was just a really stressful time for all the, we're dealing with this grief and loss and of huge life changes, and sort of the results of all of the lack of coping skills that you learn as a as a kid. And and so I really, my husband and I both really credit therapy for kind of helping us kind of get through some of that, and kind of being able to still be both here together with each other even after all of these years and after all of this stuff. With the cancer thing, it was never that, it was such a shock more than anything. I'd say it jokingly, but I'm always like, we're not a cancer family. We're a heart attack family. So I've always been sort of, trying to be focused on, eating well, or, movement, and trying, it's like, again, like you think you're doing all the right things, and then you get hit with this. And so it was such a shock. And it's weird when you go through any huge trauma, I guess, whether it's losing somebody, or getting some kind of diagnosis like this, like it's not just the initial, like there's the initial loss, but then there's like the everyday when you wake up in the morning, and then it's like, oh yeah, I have breast cancer, or oh, that person's not there. It's like it's hitting you again, like each day. And so I guess with cancer, it's just nice to be able to get to a point now where that's not like my first thought when I wake up in the morning, is that happened, or that I have to go through this again, or whatever. But yeah, I credit the dogs so much for from the beginning, for just kind of being able to help us focus on, being a good thing to focus on, being a happy thing, being something that brought us so much joy in the face of feeling like we had lost so much. And then just through all the years, through all of our dogs have just, they give us like so much every day, that I just feel like anything I'm doing for them is just like the least I can do.
I just really want to thank you on behalf of all pet parents out there who've listened to your story, and honestly, if you've not heard Erin Scott's podcast, please do tune in and support her as well, because we need more pet parents like her who are going out there to create waves and raise awareness on how to be a better pet parent, how to be a better human being. And it's all because of the love of our animals, the love of the dog, you know. And you know, she's a really nice lady. So, do support her. Do check out her Healthy Dog Journal. If you haven't started one, this is a good time to go and contact her, and check it out, because I think she's doing really great work. So thank you on behalf of all pet parents out there.
Thank you so much. It was so wonderful to be able to connect with you, and I appreciate everything that you're doing also.
Wow, I'm so thankful and grateful that you took the time to listen to this podcast. It would mean the world to me if you could subscribe, download, rate, review, and share this with others whom you care about that may enjoy it as well. Thank you, and remember to be kind to yourself and others. Have a awesome day, everyone.